You know that feeling? That deep, sinking realization that no matter what you achieve, what joy you find, or what good you put into the world, you'll never quite measure up to the person your family wants you to be? Yeah, that's been the Torres family dynamic for me since elementary school. My name is Bella, Isabella Marie Torres, but everyone calls me Bella, and I'm 32 years old, a kindergarten teacher in Queens, New York. I love my job. I mean, truly, madly, deeply love it. There's nothing on earth better than watching a 5-year-old finally click with a letter or getting a sticky-fingered hug that smells vaguely of peanut butter and glitter. My small, one-bedroom apartment near Astoria costs a ridiculous amount of my $45,000 annual salary, and my car, a trusty 2008 Honda Civic, rattles when it hits 60 miles per hour. But I'm happy, genuinely, authentically happy. My sister, Sophie, she collects a different kind of happiness. Sophie is 35 and the marketing director for a boutique luxury firm in Manhattan. Her life is a carefully curated feat of perfection. A penthouse overlooking Central Park, Hermes bags lining a dedicated shelf, and that Cartier tank watch that flashes in every photo. She calls it a bonus. That watch cost more than I've saved in 2 years. And our parents, well, they don't just enable Sophie's lifestyle. They actively bask in its reflection. Their Facebook updates are exclusively Sophie-themed. Sophie just closed another huge deal, or celebrating Sophie's promotion at the Four Seasons. My name? It pops up maybe once every 5 years, usually buried in a group photo where I'm standing slightly out of focus. My role in the family hierarchy was cemented early on. Sophie got the sun-filled master bedroom in our childhood home in Westchester. I got the cramped, converted attic with slope ceilings and a window facing the garage. My honor roll certificates were quietly slid into a drawer, while Sophie's even minor achievements were plastered on the refrigerator with magnets. I remember Dad saying in that hushed, conspiratorial tone that always made my stomach clench, "We don't want her to feel bad, Bella. Some people are just meant for simpler things." The subtext was clear. I was the simpler thing. The kind, good-hearted, non-ambitious disappointment who chose crayons over corner offices. It's funny, isn't it? The difference between how people perceive success and what actually grants you peace. I spend my days building foundations in children's minds. Sophie spends hers selling foundations to women with too much money. But in my family's eyes, only one of those things mattered. And it wasn't mine. That hierarchy, that subtle but relentless emotional subtraction, is why I held on to my secret. It's a secret I've guarded for 2 years, ever since Grandma Eleanor passed away. Grandma Eleanor, or Ellie, as she let me call her, was the only family member who ever saw me, truly saw me. She was the one who spent her final months holding my hand in her quiet room at Sunny Meadows, teaching me about everything from compound interest to the power of a well-placed pause. Everyone thought Eleanor Torres was just a retired bookkeeper, living out her days on Social Security checks. They had absolutely no idea about the papers locked away in my safe deposit box, no idea about the quiet empire she'd built in the shadows, or why she had chosen me to guard it all. The initial tremor hit us during an October family Zoom call. Sophie, as usual, angled her camera just so, catching the shimmering Manhattan skyline behind her like an accessory. "His name is Marcus Stone," she announced, practically vibrating with status-fueled excitement. "He's an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, the kind of man who actually changes the world." My mother practically squealed, instantly recognizing the name. The Stone Foundation. The very same. Sophie played it cool, but her eyes held a triumphant gleam. We met at the MoMA Gala. He said I had impeccable taste. I almost choked on the instant coffee I was sipping. Marcus Stone. Yes, I knew that name. But I kept my kindergarten teacher smile, firmly neutral, in place. The rest of the call was a blur of parental fantasy. Dad started calculating son-in-law potential aloud. Mom was already mentally planning a plaza wedding. He manages hundreds of millions in charitable funds, Sophie purred. His family is old money, the kind that builds hospital wings. I watched their faces, their eyes shining with reflected glory, already imagining the elevated family name. It was intoxicating for them. As the call wrapped up, Mom asked the question that would set the stage for everything that followed. When do we meet him? Sophie's reply was clipped and definitive. Thanksgiving. I want everything perfect. And then her eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on mine through the screen. The guest list will be tight, she added. I knew what was coming. I've lived it 1,000 times. But this time I was ready. I just didn't know how ready. 3 weeks later, the final blow came. I was eating a slightly sad peanut butter sandwich during my classroom break, listening to the muffled shrieks of 5-year-olds on the playground, when the call came in. Mom's contact photo, an aggressively happy shot of her and Sophie at the Hamptons, lit up my screen. My stomach did that familiar, terrible drop. This was it, the official exclusion. The message was unmistakable, even before I answered, and it hit me with a shocking clarity that still burns today. You know that moment when family moves from merely disappointing you to actively erasing you? I was about to live it. I swiped the call open, trying to sound breezy. Hey, Mom, what's up? She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Bella, about Thanksgiving. We've had to make some adjustments. Her voice was stiff, the way it gets when she knows she's doing something cruel but has already rationalized it as necessary for the family's benefit. I set the sandwich down. My classroom, usually a vibrant space of construction paper and organized chaos, suddenly felt sterile. Adjustments? What kind of adjustments? You won't be coming this year. She rushed the words out, as if speed would lessen the sting. The playground noise outside my window was deafening now, but all I could hear was the silence of my own shock. I knew this was coming, but hearing it spoken out loud was different. It felt like a punch to the gut. I see. And why is that, Mom? She cleared her throat, clearly reading from a script she'd rehearsed with Sophie. Marcus is from a very prominent family, Bella. Sophie needs to make the right impression, the only impression. She took a deep, theatrical breath. And frankly, your job, it might give the wrong idea about our family standing. I repeated the words back slowly, testing their bitter flavor. My job, teaching children. You know what I mean, she snapped, losing her carefully constructed composure. It's so blue-collar. Marcus mingles with CEOs, venture capitalists, people who matter. What would you even talk about? Finger painting? Lesson plans? I heard Dad clear his throat loudly in the background. He was on speaker, the silent, cowardly partner in this emotional ambush. I didn't let my voice shake. Grandma Eleanor had taught me about the power of quiet dignity. So, just to be crystal clear, you are uninviting me from the biggest family holiday of the year because my career, a career I love, embarrasses Sophie and her wealthy boyfriend. The pause was the longest kind of silence. Don't be dramatic, Isabella. It's just one dinner. Next year will be different once they're engaged, I promise. I understand, I said, my teacher voice, the one I use for mediating playground disputes, perfectly steady. I understand completely. My mother sounded genuinely surprised, maybe even disappointed that I wasn't putting up a fight. You do. Yes, Mom, I do. Give everyone my best. I hung up before she could scramble for a graceful exit. My hands weren't shaking, but my heart was thumping a furious rhythm against my ribs. I had been hoping, against all evidence, that somewhere, beneath the layers of materialism and social climbing, my parents still possessed a sliver of unconditional love. They didn't. They were perfectly willing to erase me, their own daughter, to secure a future they believed Sophie's status could buy. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. It's nothing personal, B. You understand, right? This is my shot at real happiness, real success. Don't ruin this for me. We'll coach you next year. I didn't reply. Instead, I stood up and walked over to my desk, my mind already calculating the next moves on a chessboard they didn't even know they were playing. I pulled out my secure work folder, the one labeled, simply Torres Estate Matters, and inside was a sticky note with Grandma Eleanor's elegant, looping script. When they show you who they are, believe them. The test is already running. Later that afternoon, Sophie called again, her voice dripping with artificial concern. She was probably worried my sudden silence meant I was plotting rebellion. I know Mom made it sound worse than it is, she began. But Bella, be realistic. You make $45,000 a year teaching snot-nosed kids. Marcus's car costs more than that. I'm trying to help you. Help me how, Sophie? I asked. By keeping you out of the spotlight. His circle includes Fortune 500 CEOs, ambassadors, people who vacation with senators. What would you contribute? Cute stories about playground drama? Can you imagine how that would reflect on me? On our name? I let her talk. Sometimes the best strategy is just to allow your opponent to exhaust their ammunition. You're right, I finally said, making sure my voice sounded small and defeated. I don't belong in that world. She mistook my acceptance for surrender. Finally, some sense. Look, it's not forever. Once Marcus and I are married, once I'm established, maybe we can ease you in. Small dinners first. We'll coach you on what to say, what to wear. That's generous, I replied, the sarcasm so subtle it flew right over her head. I'm trying to help you, Isabella. This is my chance at everything. Don't you want that for me? I want you to be happy, Sophie. So stay away from Thanksgiving. And Isabella, her voice hardened, a dangerous, brittle edge replacing the false sweetness. Don't even think about just showing up. I will have you removed, if necessary. The threat hung there. My little sister, who I'd walked to school every day, who'd cried in my arms when boys broke her heart, was threatening to call security on me at our family's dinner table. Understood, I said. Enjoy your dinner. After she hung up, I opened my laptop and logged into a secure board portal. Not for my school, but for a very different organization. The calendar glowed on my screen, showing an event 3 days after Thanksgiving. Annual Founders Gala. November 29th. The Ritz-Carlton. Perfect, I thought. 500 witnesses. Full media coverage. The truth always prefers a large audience. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the justice Grandma Eleanor had carefully, meticulously planned. And Marcus Stone, the man Sophie was so eager to impress, he was about to become the unintended key to unlocking everything. But to understand the weight of this key, you have to understand the extraordinary woman who handed it to me. To truly grasp the gravity of that phone call and the chess game I was setting up, you need to understand Grandma Eleanor. She wasn't just my favorite relative. She was my mentor, my anchor, and, as it turned out, my co-conspirator. My parents and Sophie always dismissed her as sweet but simple, a retired bookkeeper who had lived off a modest pension and Social Security after Grandpa died young. They paid her token visits at Sunny Meadows, the respectable but decidedly middle-class nursing home in upstate New York, where she chose to live out her final years. Sophie visited once this year, 6 months before Grandma passed. "Stayed 12 minutes," Eleanor noted, her weathered hands still elegant as she signed documents I helped her review. Asked about the will at minute 10. While my parents were fawning over Sophie's MBA pursuits and watching her career climb, Eleanor was sitting with me in her modest room, teaching me about compound interest and charitable tax law over afternoon tea. "Your sister collects handbags, Bella," she'd observed once, watching Sophie's latest Instagram story pop up. "You collect hearts, all those 5-year-olds who call you Miss Bella. Which do you think lasts longer?" Eleanor Torres had built her fortune quietly, anonymously. No one, not even her own children or grandchildren, except me in her final 2 years, knew that the Eleanor Torres Foundation, ETF, existed, let alone that it controlled over $75 million in assets. She started with nothing, a young widow with 2 small children, working 3 jobs. By the time she was 70, she was secretly funding scholarships for first-generation college students, running food banks across New York, and initiating teacher support programs. Her philosophy was simple. Money amplifies character. It doesn't create it. And she believed that the truest measure of a person was how they treated those from whom they had nothing to gain. I had been there every Sunday for 2 years, not because I expected anything, but because she was the only family member who saw me. The real me, the one who cared more about her students' reading scores than my own net worth. When she spoke about the foundation, she spoke about dignity, not dollars. "The papers are with Whitman and Associates," she told me during her last month, her voice still strong despite the cancer. "Everything is arranged. Just remember, Bella, let people underestimate you. It's the greatest advantage you'll ever have. And always, always remember the power of patience." I thought she meant a few $1,000s, maybe her jewelry. I signed papers as her healthcare proxy, believing I was just helping with medical decisions. Then, 2 weeks after her funeral, James Whitman himself, the kind of lawyer whose office smelled like old leather and serious money, had called me. That's when I learned the truth. The $75 million foundation, the board position, and the real jaw-dropper, the $25 million personal estate, which included 3 prime properties and liquid assets, was tied up in an unprecedented, ironclad document. "Your grandmother was very specific," Whitman had said, sliding documents across his enormous mahogany desk. "She believed in testing character when people didn't know they were being tested. The money is secondary to the message." I had kept it all a secret for 2 years, a massive 7-figure secret. I had been quietly shadowing the foundation's board meetings online, learning the protocols, understanding the charitable tax law just like Eleanor had taught me. I saw the incredible impact the foundation had, funding classrooms just like mine, helping families just like the ones my students came from. I understood then why she chose me. Sophie would have liquidated it to buy a new wing for her penthouse. I saw it as a responsibility, a sacred trust. Now, as I reread Sophie's callous text message, "Don't ruin this for me," I knew the time for hiding was over. The test was not only running, it was about to reach its final, explosive stage. The universe had delivered the perfect catalyst, Marcus Stone. I had no idea then just how deeply Marcus Stone was connected to the world Eleanor cherished, and how his due diligence, driven by Sophie's obsession with status, would become the ultimate undoing of my family's facade. I just knew one thing. Eleanor's meticulously crafted documents, all tied to the concept of human dignity, were about to silence every single person who had ever told me I wasn't good enough. My patience, I realized, was finally about to yield its sweet, documented, and fully legal fruit. The folder I pulled from my safe deposit box was labeled simply, Eleanor Torres Foundation Succession Protocols. Inside, the documents were pristine, notarized, and legally bulletproof. As I spread them across my kitchen table, the will, the board appointment letter, the deeds to the properties, I felt a quiet sense of awe for Grandma Eleanor. She wasn't just wealthy. She was a strategic genius, a silent warrior whose final act was a lesson in accountability. The core of the matter, the real legal grenade, was buried deep in the main body of her last will and testament. It outlined the $25 million inheritance, the liquid assets, the Manhattan brownstone, the Hamptons cottage, and a Vermont cabin, and then it laid down the law. I ran my finger over the specific paragraph. Section 7.3, the Equal Dignity Clause. Eleanor's foresight was astonishing. The clause mandated that the primary beneficiary, me initially, but it was set up as a conditional trust, must demonstrate consistent kindness and refuse to discriminate based on social or economic status. The key was the forfeiture condition that followed, the one that made James Whitman, the unflappable lawyer, briefly lose his professional cool. Any act of deliberate exclusion of family members based on their profession, income, or social standing will result in immediate and permanent forfeiture of all claims to the entire Torres estate, excluding the foundation assets, which are irrevocably dedicated to charity. And here's where Eleanor's genius truly shone. She didn't stop at the general principle. She included explicit, non-exclusive examples. I read them aloud in the silence of my apartment, letting the weight of her words settle. Such acts include, but are not limited to, refusing a family invitation due to embarrassment over the honest work performed by a relative, public or private dismissal of working-class professions, or the dissemination of false information regarding a relative's professional life to gain social advantage. The phone call from my mother, the explicit uninviting, Sophie's texts about my blue-collar job, and finger painting, they didn't just hurt my feelings. They were, in the cold, hard language of the law, a perfect textbook violation of the most crucial clause of Eleanor's will. They had literally triggered the forfeiture mechanism that would strip Sophie of every dollar, every property, and every bit of reflected glory she was counting on. I hadn't told anyone, not even Jennifer, my best friend and fellow teacher. For 2 years, I had kept my true identity as the chairwoman-in-waiting of a $75 million foundation a total secret. Why? Because Eleanor's test required it. The point wasn't the money. The point was character revealed under pressure. If I had told them I was rich, they would have invited me to Thanksgiving, kissed the ground I walked on, and never shown their true colors. They would have passed the test by being fearfully obedient. Eleanor wanted to know who they were when they thought I had nothing. The Thanksgiving exclusion wasn't just cruel. It was an irrevocable legal error committed in pursuit of pure status. My patience, my silence, my willingness to accept their cruelty without fighting back had simply allowed them to provide the necessary evidence, notarized and time-stamped in their own words. Now, I focused on the next step. Marcus Stone. Sophie saw him as a trophy husband. I saw him as a major donor to the charitable world. I needed to know how much he knew and how quickly. I pulled up the official ETF website. There was my name, listed under the board of directors. Isabella M. Torres, chairman of the board. Appointed by founder, 2023. My photo was conspicuously absent by my explicit request. Marcus Stone, a man who managed a foundation dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, would conduct due diligence on anyone dating his potential fiancé's family. If he bothered to check the nonprofit sector where Sophie claimed their family status lay, he would find my name. He would find the name of the kindergarten teacher his girlfriend was so desperate to hide, and he would realize Sophie was a fraud. I thought about calling Sophie, warning her, but then I remembered the casual threat, "I will have you removed if necessary." That dismissiveness, that total lack of respect for my simple dignity, was the very thing Eleanor's will was designed to punish. Justice, Eleanor had once whispered to me, is simply accountability dressed in a suit. I logged into the Foundation's event portal and added 5 names to the guest list for the annual gala. The Torres family. I had the invitations sent directly to my address. I intended to deliver them personally after Luton. The groundwork was laid. The clock was ticking. Now, all I had to do was wait for the one night that had meant my exclusion to pass, so that the night that meant their revelation could finally begin. I was ready to watch the show. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of day that matches a melancholy mood perfectly. The smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon rolls wafted through the windows of the apartment building, a cruel reminder of the warmth and tradition I was consciously excluded from. But I wasn't sad. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, surgical focus. This wasn't personal anymore. It was documentation. I ordered Chinese takeout from Mr. Lou's, the best orange chicken in Queens, and settled down in my Target-bought pajamas to grade papers. As the late afternoon deepened, I kept my phone silent, waiting. I knew the performance was happening miles away in Westchester, a perfect, sparkling tableau of family success. At 2 p.m., the silence broke. Sophie's Instagram story popped up. The dining room, usually a little dated, had been completely transformed. Crystal glasses I'd never seen, new china with aggressive gold edges, and a floral centerpiece that must have cost more than my weekly groceries. Sophie was positioned perfectly next to Marcus, her hand strategically placed to showcase what looked like a newly acquired diamond tennis bracelet. The caption read, "Perfect family dinner with my love. So grateful for family who understand what really matters. Hashtag blessed future. Hashtag the stones." I scrolled through the photos, a detached financial analyst reviewing a shaky prospectus. Mom was beaming, Dad was pouring wine. It was everything they'd ever wanted. High status, high income, high visibility. But then I noticed Marcus. In the posed shots, he smiled politely, but his eyes didn't quite reach the mark. In one candid photo, he was leaning back, lost in thought, staring directly at an empty chair at the end of the table. My chair. His brow was furrowed, a flicker of something. Confusion? Discomfort on his face. The contrast between his distant expression and Sophie's performative joy was striking. He looked like a man who felt obligated, not in love. Then came Mom's post. So proud of my successful daughter and her wonderful boyfriend. The future is bright. The comments poured in, gushing about the beautiful couple. Then I saw a question from Cousin Amy. "Where's Bella?" Sophie's reply was quick, smooth, and a perfectly tailored lie. "She had other plans, Amy. You know how dedicated teachers are to their work." Lying came so easily to her. It wasn't even a second thought. It was a reflex, a tool to manage the narrative. My existence, my genuine, fulfilling career, was a liability to be managed, disguised, or simply erased. I took a bite of my orange chicken. It was excellent, That night, the fortune cookie from Mr. Lewes read, "Patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet." I folded the paper and tucked it into my wallet, right next to the crisp linen invitations to the gala. It felt like a sign, a small nod from the universe that I was on the right track. Around 8:30 p.m., my phone buzzed again, an unknown number from a Manhattan exchange. I almost didn't answer. I usually let unknown numbers go straight to voicemail, but something, a little nudge of instinct, made me swipe open the screen. Isabella Torres? The voice was deep, measured, and instantly recognizable from the Zoom call. Professional, careful. Nothing like the entitled heir I'd expected, given Sophie's description. Speaking. "This is Marcus Stone. We need to talk." I didn't flinch. I just smiled into the empty apartment. "Mr. Stone, I'm busy grading papers right now. You just finished Thanksgiving dinner. Shouldn't you be focused on that blessed future Sophie posted about?" His tone shifted, becoming less formal, more investigative. "I did a bit of due diligence today. You see, I manage a foundation that partners with nonprofits across the city. Your fiancé's sister, who my girlfriend claimed was unemployed and a bit unstable, is listed as the chairman of the board for the Eleanor Torres Foundation, the same foundation that is funding a new literacy program we were considering co-sponsoring." The shock twist I'd been waiting for had arrived, not in a dramatic courtroom scene, but in a quiet Thanksgiving evening phone call. Sophie's lie, deployed to hide my meager salary, had backfired spectacularly, leading him straight to my secret, multi-million-dollar philanthropic identity. "That must be a very confusing discovery, Mr. Stone," I replied calmly. "Confusing is an understatement. I've just spent 5 hours with a woman who lied about everything, including her entire family structure, to impress me. I need to know why. You want to know why she lied? Or you want to know why I kept the truth a secret?" I asked, my voice still light. There was a long pause on the line. "I want to know what's going on, Isabella. And more importantly, I need to know who I was actually having Thanksgiving dinner with." "Then you should ask your date that question, Mr. Stone. But if you want the real, unvarnished truth, you're welcome to join my family. They're getting the full explanation in 4 days." I gave him the time and place of the gala, the event Sophie had tried to keep me out of. I didn't have to wait for his reply. His stunned silence was all the confirmation I needed. The fuse was lit. I didn't have to wait long for Marcus's due diligence to detonate. 5 days after Thanksgiving, precisely at 7 a.m., a frantic, aggressive pounding rattled my apartment door. It sounded like a crisis, which of course it was. Through the peephole, I saw the pale, distraught faces of my parents. Mom's usually impeccable blowout was disheveled, and Dad's face was flushed red, either from anger or from the exertion of climbing 3 flights of stairs in my walk-up building, a building they had never visited before. It took a full-blown family catastrophe to bring them to my door. I opened the door, dressed in my standard teaching uniform, sensible khakis and a cardigan with whimsical alphabet buttons. "Good morning," I greeted them cheerfully. "What did you do?" Mom shrieked, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. She looked around my modest, cluttered living room, my haven, with a look of pure disgust and panic. "What did I do, Mom?" I walked past her, pouring myself a cup of coffee. The quiet domesticity of the moment was a perfect counterpoint to their chaos. "Don't play dumb." Dad slammed the door shut, the sound echoing in the small space. "Marcus Stone broke up with Sophie. Yesterday. At brunch. In public. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" "That must be very upsetting for her. I agreed, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Upsetting. Mom's voice climbed an octave. He walked into the Stone Foundation office and saw your portrait. Your portrait, Isabella, as the chairman of the board of the Eleanor Torres Foundation. You ruined her. Ah, so Marcus was faster than I thought. He hadn't waited for the gala. He had gone straight to the source, and the truth had hit him like a freight train. Why didn't you tell us? Dad demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous banker's growl. How could you hide something like this from your own family? The same way you hid uninviting me from Thanksgiving. I countered, my voice flat. Isabella, that's different. Mom insisted, grasping at straws. Is it? I turned to face them, leaning against the kitchen counter. You didn't want me there because my job embarrassed Sophie. Because I'm too blue-collar for her rich boyfriend. Your words, Mom, not mine. Sophie is devastated because her careful construction of reality just collapsed. I did nothing. Marcus discovered the truth on his own. Fix this, Dad ordered, switching to his old bank, VP voice of command. Call Marcus. Tell him you'll resign. Whatever it takes. This is your sister's future. Mom's face went pale. Your sister's happiness meant more to you than your dignity, I said, hitting them where it hurt. I understand that, but I won't lie or resign to fix what Sophie broke herself. I sat down my mug, the clink echoing the finality of the statement. You want to know the whole truth? The real truth? The one Grandma Eleanor meticulously planned? Come to the foundation gala tomorrow night. Everything will be explained. Bring Sophie. She'll definitely want to hear this. I handed them the embossed invitations I'd been saving. They stood there, clutching the thick linen paper, staring at the elegant script, the Eleanor Torres Foundation, annual gala, black tie, the Ritz-Carlton, and at the name of the founder, Eleanor M. Torres, their mother, a woman they thought they knew. They looked at the invitation like it was a lifeline or maybe a live grenade. They left, silent and defeated, but their departure was only the quiet before the full-scale family assault. Within hours, Sophie was at my school during afternoon pickup. Her mascara, despite its waterproof claims, was already streaking down her puffy cheeks. How could you? She wailed, totally ignoring the fact that parents were staring, trying to shepherd their children away from the blonde woman in designer sweats having a public meltdown. You've always been jealous of me. Sophie, I'm working, I said, guiding my last student, a tearful little boy named Leo, to his waiting mother, maintaining my professional smile. I never spoke to Marcus about you. Liar, he said. He can't be with someone who's ashamed of their own family. Where would he get that idea? From you, I thought, but didn't say. She was right on the verge of total collapse, and I needed her to save the rest of her performance for the gala stage. I just needed her to show up. Come to the gala tomorrow, Sophie, I urged, my voice softening just enough to hook her. Listen to what Grandma had to say. Then we'll see about everything. She left without another word, her expensive Tom Ford perfume lingering in the air, thick and suffocating. I looked at the calendar, November 29th. The final act was ready. But first, I had to survive the day of the public campaign. The moment Sophie realized the true scope of my secret, not just the chairman title, but the imminent threat to the $25 million inheritance, she transitioned from defensive panic into full-blown public warfare. The assault began immediately after she left my school. I was just settling in to plan my next unit when my phone started buzzing relentlessly. The family group chat, the one I'd been removed from months ago, had apparently exploded. My cousin Amy, bless her heart, sent me screenshots of the chaos. Sophie had started a vicious online campaign. Isabella is trying to steal my grandmother's money through elder abuse. She manipulated Grandma when she was sick. Always knew she was bitter about being the failure. The narrative was meticulously crafted. Jealous, unstable, blue-collar sister weaponizes a sick old woman's will against her successful, glamorous sibling. She posted on Instagram, Facebook, and even LinkedIn, using sophisticated language designed to appeal to her network of fashionistas and marketing execs. "Mental health issues are serious," she wrote, oozing false concern, "and I truly hope Isabella gets the help she needs before she hurts the family any further." The comments poured in, her carefully cultivated network rallying to her defense. Marketing executives, fashion bloggers, wealth managers, they all echoed her pain, condemning the betrayal. My phone had 37 missed calls from extended family and mutual friends, all suddenly interested in my life. The noise was overwhelming, a digital lynch mob whipped up by Sophie's narrative control. I almost broke. I nearly called James Whitman, the lawyer, and told him to cancel everything. Let Sophie have the money. Let my parents have their golden child. Let me just fade back into the background where they always preferred me. The path of least resistance was so tempting. But then I looked at the wall in my classroom, my wall of student photos. 25 bright, innocent faces who genuinely believed Miss Bella was magic. They didn't care that my car was 12 years old or that my clothes came from Target. They saw kindness and commitment. I opened my desk drawer and found the final, handwritten note Grandma Eleanor had slipped me. "Stand up for what's right, even if you stand alone." "I'm trying, Grandma," I whispered to the empty room. The next message wasn't from family. It was from Marcus Stone. The foundation's major donors are all confirming attendance. Whatever you're planning, it's going to have a major audience. I've done my research, Isabella. I know how airtight your grandmother's will is. Then James Whitman, video equipment tested. Legal team on standby. The board is ready to support you. Your grandmother would be proud. The noise of Sophie's hysteria and the family's condemnation faded. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about the integrity of the foundation and the dignity of the people they served. The very people Sophie had dismissed. Later that evening, Jennifer, my friend and co-teacher, arrived with my dress, a simple, elegant navy blue gown, and a makeup bag. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Bella? This is going to be messy." They excluded me for being a teacher, Jen. They called my job embarrassing and said I'd humiliate them in front of Marcus's important friends. I told her my voice steel. And now they're going to learn that Eleanor's important friends have been funding teachers and social workers all along. The foundation they're so desperate to access exists specifically to support the people they look down on. I looked at the clock. 2 hours until curtain. 2 hours until 28 years of being the family disappointment finally meant something profound. "Justice isn't revenge, Jen," I said, putting on my simple pearl earrings. "It's accountability with documentation." Before leaving for the Ritz, James Whitman called with one last crucial detail. He had the sealed folder Eleanor had insisted on. She called it the nuclear option, Isabella. It contains something that will end any contest immediately and irrevocably. Pray you don't need it, but it's secured. Holding the navy dress, I looked at myself in the mirror. Not the designer gown they expected from New Money, but exactly what Eleanor would have chosen. It's not the dress that matters, she'd taught me. It's the conviction in your heart and the documentation in your briefcase. And mine was bulletproof. I was ready to stop hiding. The stage was set for the night the truth met power. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered like a jewel box. Crystal chandeliers cast warm, expensive light across 500 of New York's most prominent philanthropists, dressed in their finest black tie attire. The servers glided silently, offering champagne. I recognized the label Cristal, the very kind Sophie had once mocked me for not being able to afford. The air was thick with the scent of money, ambition, and anticipation. I entered through a side door, strategically avoiding the main entrance where I knew Sophie would be executing her grand entrance. I saw her immediately, even across the vast ballroom. She was a beacon of scarlet drama in an Oscar de la Renta gown, positioned near the foundation's main banner, gesturing animatedly to a cluster of major donors. She was spinning her narrative, no doubt, portraying herself as the rightful, compassionate heir, the one ready to usher the Eleanor Torres Foundation into a new era of glamour. Almost instantly I was surrounded. Isabella Torres? I'm Margaret Vanderbilt. A silver-haired woman greeted me, her eyes warm. Your grandmother funded my literacy program for 10 years. I never got to thank her. Then came others, teachers whose classroom supplies Eleanor had paid for anonymously, food bank directors she'd kept afloat, scholarship recipients who were now running their own nonprofits. None of them had known the name of their benefactress until the invitations arrived. They weren't interested in my career. They were interested in my connection to the quiet kindness that had changed their lives. Across the room, I watched my parents finally notice the attention I was receiving. Mom's face went from confused to alarmed. She whispered urgently to Sophie, who spun around, her scarlet dress flaring dramatically. Our eyes met across the sea of evening wear. For a brief, electrifying moment, I saw pure, raw fear flicker across her face. But then that Torres pride, the very thing Eleanor warned would be our downfall, kicked in. She lifted her chin, fixed a triumphant smile, and began pushing through the crowd toward me. The MC announced, "Dinner is served. Please find your seats." I had arranged the seating myself. Sophie, Mom, and Dad were at table 1, front and center, with a perfect, unobstructed view of the massive presentation screen behind the podium. Marcus Stone and his delegation from the Stone Foundation were at table 2. The press was scattered strategically throughout. As I took my seat at the head table with James Whitman and the ETF board members, I felt the weight of 500 curious gazes. They had come expecting standard charity speeches. They were about to witness the public, irreversible unraveling of a family's carefully constructed facade. Dinner was served. Filet mignon that Sophie barely touched, too busy working the room between courses. I watched her perform. She was good. Every laugh, every anecdote, every calculated gesture was designed to establish her as Eleanor's spiritual heir. As dessert arrived, Sophie made her move. She stood, tapping her champagne glass with a spoon until the room quieted. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she announced, her voice perfectly modulated, projecting confidence. "But I simply can't wait any longer to share something wonderful." The MC looked confused, checking his program. This wasn't scheduled. "As many of you know," Sophie continued, fixing her gaze on Marcus at the next table, "I'm Sophia Torres, Eleanor Torres's granddaughter, and I'm thrilled to announce that I will be taking a leadership role in the foundation, working alongside my dear friend, Marcus Stone, to expand our mission." "Sophie, that's not," Marcus started, rising abruptly. Oh, Marcus, always so modest, she laughed, ignoring him. Everyone, Marcus and I have been planning incredible initiatives. The future is bright, and the foundation is in good hands. The future of the Eleanor Torres Foundation will be discussed by its actual board, Marcus cut in, his voice firm and carrying across the ballroom. And for the record, we are not together, Sophie. I made that explicitly clear. The room buzzed. Cameras, which had been discreetly recording, suddenly became overt. Reporters leaned forward, smelling blood. Sophie's composure cracked, revealing the panicked fury beneath. This is just a misunderstanding. My sister, she pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me. She's manipulated everyone. She's not who you think she is. Security, James Whitman murmured quietly into his phone. No. Sophie's voice rose, shrill and desperate. You need to know the truth. Isabella is a nobody, a kindergarten teacher who makes nothing, contributes nothing. She tricked our grandmother. She isolated her. She stole. I stood up, raising my hand to the security guards. Let her finish, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The room went silent. I looked directly at my sister, my heart rate steady. Go ahead, Sophie. Tell everyone exactly what you think of me and my job. Don't hold back. She took the bait. Of course, she always did. You're an embarrassment, she spat. 45,000 a year. Driving that ancient Honda. Shopping at Target. You are everything our family isn't supposed to be. And what? I asked quietly, walking slowly toward the podium, my borrowed heels clicking against the marble. Is our family supposed to be? The cameras tracked me. Sophie stood frozen at table 1. Her scarlet dress now looking less like high fashion and more like a warning flag. The moment was mine. It was time to pull the pin on the grenade. I reached the podium with measured, deliberate steps. The transition from Sophie's frantic, screaming indictment to my calm, quiet authority was stunning. I looked out at the 500 faces, financiers, journalists, philanthropists who were expecting the dramatic, and I gave them the documented, surgical truth. Thank you, Sophie, I said into the microphone, my voice amplified, yet still conversational. I appreciate you clarifying my social standing for everyone here. I clicked the remote. The foundation's elegant logo appeared on the massive screen behind me. Good evening. I'm Isabella Torres, chairman of the board of the Eleanor Torres Foundation. For those who don't know me, which is most of you, I teach kindergarten at PS 47 in Queens, New York. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The contrast between my simple introduction and Sophie's grandiose claims was the first piece of documentation. My grandmother, Eleanor Torres, built this foundation over 40 years. She worked 3 jobs as a young widow, invested every spare penny, and quietly accumulated the wealth to change thousands of lives. She never sought recognition. She never wanted galas like this. I clicked again. Photos appeared. Eleanor at food banks and classrooms, mentoring immigrant families. Always in the background, always anonymous. But tonight we break that tradition, I continued, because Eleanor left us one final, profound lesson about what really matters. A lesson about dignity. Mom grabbed Sophie's arm, desperately trying to pull her down to her seat. Sophie shook her off, her face flushed with a toxic mix of rage and champagne. Before we continue, I said, looking directly at my sister, I should mention that 3 days ago I wasn't supposed to be here. I was uninvited from my family's Thanksgiving dinner because my profession, being a teacher, would embarrass my sister in front of her boyfriend. Gasps erupted. The cameras swung wildly between Sophie and me. The boyfriend she mentioned, Marcus Stone, is here tonight as one of our major donors. Marcus, would you mind confirming what Sophie told you about me? Marcus stood slowly, every eye in the room fixed on him. She said Isabella was unemployed, living off family money. She claimed Isabella had been institutionalized for depression and that the family had to exclude her from events because she was unstable. The room exploded into noise. Sophia screamed something unintelligible. Now, I said, clicking the remote, let's hear what Eleanor Torres had to say about all of this. Eleanor's face, captured on high-definition video, filled the massive screen. She sat in James Whitman's office, looking directly into the camera with those sharp, knowing eyes. The timestamp showed the recording was made 6 months before her death. If you are watching this, Eleanor's strong, recorded voice filled the ballroom. Then something has happened that requires absolute clarity about my final wishes. I am Eleanor Marie Torres of sound mind and body, as verified by the 3 witnesses present. The camera panned slightly to show James Whitman, Dr. Patterson, and Judge Reynolds sitting calmly in the background, verifying her capacity. This recording concerns my personal estate and the conditions attached to it. My estate consists of $25 million in liquid assets, 3 prime properties in New York, and controlling interest in the foundation. This inheritance comes with one unbreakable condition. Eleanor paused, her eyes seemingly looking directly into Sophie's terrified face at table 1. The beneficiary must demonstrate consistent kindness and refuse to discriminate based on social or economic status. This includes, and I am being specific here, never excluding family members because of their profession or income level. Sophie shot up, shaking violently. This is fake. This is. Sit down, Miss Torres. Judge Reynolds, who was sitting at table 3, cut in calmly. I witnessed this recording personally. Eleanor continued, her voice sad but firm. My granddaughter, Sophia, has shown a pattern of valuing wealth over family, status over substance. If she has excluded Isabella for being a teacher, a profession I deeply respect and helped to fund for 40 years, then she has failed my test. The screen split. On one side, Eleanor's face. On the other, screenshots began to appear. Sophie's texts about my embarrassing job, my mother's Facebook post about excluding me from the perfect family, and the text from Sophie. I will have you removed if necessary. The inheritance transfers immediately to the secondary beneficiary, Isabella Marie Torres, who has spent 8 years teaching children, volunteering every weekend, and never once boasting about her connection to this foundation. She is a woman who understands true dignity. The room exploded. Cameras flashed wildly. Reporters shouted. But the verdict had been delivered by the only authority that mattered, the matriarch's unassailable will. It was the most shocking public display of justice any of these high society guests had ever witnessed. As Eleanor's image froze on the screen, James Whitman, the unflappable estate lawyer, walked to the podium. He carried a leather portfolio, his movements precise and professional. The chaos slowly subsided as the guests realized the legal hammer was about to drop. Ladies and gentlemen, as the executive of Eleanor Torres's estate, Whitman announced, his voice cutting through the remaining buzz, I am required to confirm the legal standing of what you have just witnessed. He opened the portfolio, revealing documents tagged with legal seals. On November 23rd, 2025, Thanksgiving Day, Sophia Torres sent these messages to her sister. He clicked the remote. The texts appeared on the screen, enormous and undeniable. Your blue-collar job would embarrass me. Stay away from my real family. You're everything our family shouldn't be. These messages, sent voluntarily and documented through cellular records, constitute a clear, undeniable violation of Section 7.3 of Eleanor Torres's will, Whitman stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Additionally, we have this email from Mrs. Linda Torres to extended family, explaining that Isabella was excluded from Thanksgiving because her profession was not appropriate for the company they were keeping. Mom stood up, wobbling. We didn't know about the will. We swear. Irrelevant, Whitman replied, not even looking at her. The condition is not dependent on your knowledge of the document. It is dependent on your character. Dr. Patterson, the witness, stood from his table. I performed cognitive assessments on Mrs. Torres monthly for her final year. Every score was perfect. She was sharper at 90 than most people at 50. Judge, Reynolds added, the will was filed with the court 2 years ago. It is ironclad. Whitman pulled out the final document. As of this moment, Sophia Torres has permanently forfeited all claims to the Eleanor Torres estate. The full inheritance, the $25 million, the Manhattan brownstone, the Hamptons cottage, the Vermont cabin, and the controlling interest in this foundation, transfers immediately to Isabella Torres. He turned to my parents. You, Mr. and Mrs. Torres, were named as potential trustees with an annual stipend of $50,000. However, your documented participation in the discrimination against your daughter, as evidenced by your complicity in the exclusion, disqualifies you as well. Dad collapsed into his chair, looking instantly older. Mom was openly crying, mascara running down her face. This is theft. Sophia shrieked, finally finding her voice. I'll sue. I'll contest the will. You'll lose, Whitman said simply. Your own words convicted you. Sophia's meltdown was spectacular. She grabbed a champagne flute and threw it at the screen where Eleanor's frozen image seemed to watch with silent disappointment. The glass shattered harmlessly against the projection surface. You planned this, she whirled on me, her designer dress tearing at the seam as she moved. You manipulated her. You turned her against me. I visited her, I said quietly, the microphone catching every word. Every Sunday for 2 years. You came once, Sophie, for 12 minutes. I was building my career. I had important things. More important than family? I asked. That's what you told Mom, isn't it? That Marcus and his connections were more important than having your sister at Thanksgiving? You don't understand business. You don't understand anything. You're just a teacher. Just a teacher. I let the words hang there, thick with meaning. The same profession as Mrs. Davidson here, who Grandma funded for 20 years. Mr. Martinez, whose classroom she supplied. Ms. Washington, whose students she sent to college. I gestured around the room. Half the people here are teachers, social workers, nonprofit directors. The very people you consider beneath you. Marcus stood, walking deliberately to the podium. Sophia, you told me your family was in finance, that your grandmother was a society matron. You lied about everything to fit into my world. My world. Marcus laughed bitterly. My foundation exclusively funds working-class initiatives. My mother was a seamstress. My father drove a taxi. I built my wealth to lift others up, not to separate myself from them. He looked at the room. The Stone Foundation is cutting all ties with Sophia's company, effective immediately. We don't work with people who discriminate against the communities we serve. The dominoes fell fast. 3 other major donors stood and announced they were also severing relationships with Sophie's firm. Her phone, still sitting on the table, lit up with what must have been panicked calls from her business partners. "You've destroyed me," she whispered, finally understanding. "No, Sophie," I replied, standing tall. "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided I wasn't good enough to sit at your table." The final act of justice was about to begin, and it wasn't about taking money, it was about giving it away. I returned to the podium, waiting for the chaos to subside. Security had moved closer to Sophie, but she had collapsed into her chair, sobbing into her hands while my mother rubbed her back ineffectually. The cameras and the silence of the room were focused entirely on me. "I want to be clear about something," I said, my voice steady, carrying both authority and conviction. "I never wanted the money. I didn't know about the will's specific conditions until after Grandma died. I kept quiet because I wanted my family to show me who they really were when they thought I had nothing to offer." I paused for effect, letting that truth sink into the hundreds of cynical, wealthy minds gathered there. Then I clicked the remote one last time. A new slide appeared on the screen, bold and simple. The Eleanor Torres Equal Dignity Initiative. "Tonight," I announced, and the sheer magnitude of the statement made the room gasp, "I am announcing that the entire $25 million inheritance will be immediately donated to the Eleanor Torres Foundation. Every dollar, every cent, every asset." Applause erupted, not polite charity applause, but a thunderous, emotional response that shook the chandeliers. Cameras flashed furiously. "This money," I continued, "will fund a new program specifically for underpaid essential workers. The teachers, the caregivers, the social workers, the very people my family thought weren't good enough to share a Thanksgiving meal with." I clicked again, showing architectural renderings. The properties, the Manhattan brownstone, the Hamptons cottage, and the Vermont cabin, will be converted into affordable housing and temporary retreat spaces for New York City educators. No teacher should have to choose between their calling and a living wage. More applause, deep and genuine. I saw teachers in the audience, those who knew Eleanor's kindness, openly crying. The money was going exactly where it was needed most, amplifying the values my family had just publicly discarded. I addressed my sister directly, who had stopped sobbing and was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and shock. "Sophie, you're not cut off. The foundation is offering you a position, a volunteer position, of course, 20 hours a week, working directly with the communities you've dismissed. You can learn what Grandma knew, that dignity isn't determined by income." "You're humiliating me," she hissed, low enough that only I could hear it. "No, Sophie, I'm offering you redemption. The same chance Grandma gave me every Sunday when she taught me that wealth without compassion is just greed with better accessories." I turned to my parents. "The offer extends to you both. Family therapy is non-negotiable if you want any relationship with me going forward. Respect isn't optional anymore." Dad nodded slowly, defeated but perhaps seeing a small flicker of hope. Mom was still staring at Sophie as if she was seeing her daughter, the product of their ambition, for the very first time. "One last thing," I said, pulling out the sealed envelope James Whitman had given me, the nuclear option. "Grandma left this, called it the final fail-safe, should anyone contest the will. Should I open it, Sophie?" My sister shook her head violently, terror replacing her anger. Whatever she suspected was in there. She knew it was worse than anything already revealed. "Then we're done here." The media coverage the next morning was swift and brutal. Heiress loses millions over Thanksgiving snub, trended nationally. The New York Times ran a feature, When Snobbery Costs $25 million, a modern morality tale. Sophie's firm lost 7 major clients in 48 hours. Her Instagram, once a testament to her success, was flooded with comments calling her out for elitism and cruelty. She deleted her accounts by day 3. My parents came to my apartment a week later. They looked older, smaller, diminished. Dad spoke first, his voice gravelly. We failed you, Bella. Both of you. We created this toxic dynamic. Mom added quietly, Your grandmother tried to tell us, but we didn't listen. We confused money with worth. Are you willing to do the work? I asked. Real, uncomfortable therapy, not just apologies. They agreed. Dr. Kim, a specialist in family dynamics and class issues, would see us weekly. The public exposure was painful, but the private confrontation was the necessary first step toward healing. The inheritance they had lost was never really about money. It was about finally understanding that the woman serving your coffee deserves the exact same dignity as the one buying the coffee shop. 6 months after the gala, I was exactly where I belonged, my kindergarten classroom at PS 47 in Queens. My life hadn't changed much outwardly. Same alphabet posters, same reading corner, same slightly stained circle time rug. But everything else had transformed. The Eleanor Torres Foundation was now a juggernaut of dignity. We had distributed $8 million in emergency grants to teachers facing eviction or sudden medical bills in the first 6 months alone. We funded 50 classroom renovations and launched a massive program providing free, high-quality supplies to any educator who asked. No paperwork, no justification needed. Eleanor would have loved the simplicity. My school, PS 47, received a $2 million infrastructure grant. My principal cried when I handed her the check. Your grandmother never forgot us, she said. I didn't correct her assumption. In a way, Eleanor had planned this, not just for them, but for me. My parents were in therapy, making slow, painful progress. Mom stopped mentioning Sophie's past success entirely, focusing instead on small, genuine conversations about the present. Dad volunteered every weekend at the Foundation's financial literacy programs, teaching budgeting skills to immigrant families. Penance, he called it. Marcus Stone and I became unexpected allies. The Stone Foundation partnered with ours for a nationwide initiative supporting working-class families. We kept it professional, though sometimes I caught him looking at me with something like regret for what might have been if we'd met before the Thanksgiving fiasco. He often repeated Eleanor's philosophy. Revenge makes you smaller. Justice makes you stronger. Time magazine named me Philanthropist of the Year. I wore the same simple navy dress from the gala to the photo shoot. The interviewer asked why I still taught when I could do bigger things. 25 5-year-olds trust me to teach them to read, I said. There's nothing bigger than that. The article mentioned Sophie once, noting she declined to comment. What they didn't know was that she had finally started volunteering at a Chicago food bank 20 hours a week, exactly as I had suggested. The director, an old friend of Eleanor's, sent me updates. She's learning, the director wrote. Slowly, but she's learning to listen more than she talks. I kept Eleanor's photo on my desk, surrounded by crayon drawings and construction paper cards. Sometimes, during quiet moments, I'd tell her about the lives we were changing. You were right, Grandma, I'd whisper. Standing up for what's right is lonely at first, but eventually the right people stand with you. A year after that painful Thanksgiving exclusion, I finally opened the letter from Sophie. She'd written it in purple ink, the same color she'd used for notes when we were kids, before status poisoned everything. Isabella, it began. I used to think Grandma chose wrong, that you'd manipulated her into giving you everything. But I work at a food bank now, making less than you do. And yesterday, a woman cried because we gave her groceries without making her prove she deserved them. I think I finally understand what Grandma saw, what you both saw. That dignity isn't something you earn or buy. It's something you recognize in everyone, or you don't have it yourself. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't suggest reconciliation. She simply acknowledged the truth we'd both always known, but only one of us had accepted. I folded the letter, placing it in Eleanor's folder, the one with all the important documents. Not the legal ones, but the human ones, the thank you notes from teachers, the drawings from students, the photos of families in the houses we'd converted from my inheritance. Looking back, I could have handled that Thanksgiving differently. I could have fought to be included, begged for my place at the table, or revealed my position earlier, using it as leverage for respect. But Eleanor taught me that respect earned through power isn't respect at all. It's fear dressed in nicer clothes. The family that excluded me for being just a teacher learned that their values were moral bankruptcy dressed in designer labels. The inheritance they lost was never really about money. It was about the knowledge that your worth isn't negotiable. It doesn't increase with your salary or decrease with someone else's opinion. And that, friends, is the real story behind the headlines. It's not the one you saw trending about the millionaire heiress who lost it all. It's the one about the kindergarten teacher who gave it all away to protect the simple dignity of hard work. The biggest lesson I took from Grandma Eleanor is this. The final measure of your success isn't how high you climb, but how well you treat the people who are still climbing. She didn't just leave money. She left a profound, actionable test of character. My sister and parents failed that test, not because they weren't invited to the gala, but because they were invited to Thanksgiving and chose to erase me to improve their social standing. The shock factor of that public revelation, the moment the screen showed Eleanor's face and then Sophie's vicious texts, was necessary. It wasn't revenge for views. It was accountability for change. It was a mirror held up to 500 people who, perhaps, had forgotten the value of the quiet people in their lives. Today, my life is still full of glitter and glue, but now it's also filled with purpose on a scale I never imagined. I sit on the board of a multi-million-dollar foundation, and I still teach 5-year-olds. The truth is, my job doesn't define my worth, and my family's opinion doesn't determine my value. That is a lesson I want every one of you watching, especially those of you who've been the disappointment or the odd one out, to take to heart. Your dignity is a gift. It's not contingent on your title, your bank account, or the car you drive. Stand firm in that knowledge, even if you stand alone, especially then. So, let me ask you, if you received a letter from a loved one today, what evidence would it contain about your character? Think about that. Because sometimes the best inheritance you can receive is the knowledge that you don't need anyone else's validation to know your own worth. Thank you for listening to my story. This is Bella Torres, reminding you that you are enough, exactly as you are. Until next time, keep standing tall, even in a Target dress.